Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We are waking up with watches, and everything you see here is in stock and for sale. Email me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for prices on the watches you see here. Some of them are not listed on our website. We're also looking to build inventory, always. Watches come in, watches go out. We look to buy, sell, or trade. And when we buy, no upper limit on value paid. We wire cash, we pay fast, and we will buy your entire collection of Grubel 4C Grand Complications. So, to buy, trade, or sell, all roads lead to tmosso@thewatchbox.com. That is me. Jumping straight in, I promised you a fight, and here it is. One of the most exciting matchups I've featured on this show in a while. We have the Girard Perregaux Laureato Middle East limited edition, a 28-piece series, 42 millimeters in stainless steel, and the most recent version of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Datejust 41. They are similar in size. They are similar in fit, water resistance. They are excellent timekeepers, and I have to say, the Girard Perregaux wins my heart. The Rolex probably wins my head. But let's see what makes the Girard Perregaux so appealing. Now, this is, of course, the standard Girard Perregaux Laureato 42. What makes all Laureato 42s exceptional is just how thin they are, at 10.9 millimeters thick. Even the Rolex, slender though it is, it's still 11.6 millimeters thick. Now, the Girard Perregaux is also still 100 meters water resistant in spite of that. As with every Laureato since the original back in the mid-70s, here we have a combination of integrated bracelet, tonneau-like case, and a geometrically faceted bezel that is actually a fixture of the case. It's part of the case. Three-piece case. We have the screw-in bezel, we have the case back, and then we have the mid case. Now, what I like here is that Girard Perregaux has upgraded the Laureato 42 automatics. They now use the caliber 1800 base, which has a 54-hour power reserve versus the 46 of the old 3300, but it's also bigger and better fills the case back than the 3300. You can see that there's a lovely mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges. There's Cote de Genève across their tops, circular Cote de Genève on the rotor, black polished screw heads, as well as black polished posts that are used to locate the bridges. It is a 4 Hertz beat rate. It features a lovely barrel bridge and a handsome satinated barrel with black polished teeth on top of the ratchet wheel. Hacking seconds with a quick set. Of course, this watch is number 7 of 28, a Middle East limited edition brought in by our Dubai branch. One of the finest features of this watch is that it's not just an Arabic dial, it is also an Arabic date wheel, and the quick set system allows you to enjoy that secondary feature, which is all too rare on Eastern Arabic special editions. It is a very cool watch inside and out, and as you can see, it has a lovely black galvanized pyramid style hobnail. We'll throw it on my wrist, get a sense of how it wears. It's very comfortable. Remember, super flat and flush. Could easily be your dress watch. It is a sports watch, no holds barred, being automatic, well loomed, and 100 meters water resistant. It'll slide easily underneath the cuff, and the bracelet is quite handsome as the taper here is very pronounced, something that's not necessarily true of the Rolex. Now, this is a much scarcer watch. Even if it were just a Girard Perregaux Laureato 42, you would see far fewer of these annually made than you would of this model right here, which is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41, a model that originally launched in 2016. It's the successor to the Oyster Perpetual Datejust II. This is the Datejust 41. I'm sorry, I called it the OP a second ago. It is the Datejust 41, and it came out in 2016 in precious metal and two-tone. The next year it came out in steel, and that is the model we have right here. Now you can see that the dial is quite handsome. Black lacquered, glossy, white gold hands, crown, and indices. We will do a quick loom shot because I think one area where the Rolex really noses ahead compared to the GP is the fact that its dial is fully loomed. It's also a different color, Chromalight versus Superluminova. Now, inside the case here, we have a caliber 32-35, but we can't see it, so advantage Girard Perregaux. For what it's worth, I've seen both movements, and the GP is better finished. The Rolex, however, is more anti-magnetic, more shock-resistant, and it has a 70-hour power reserve. Throw it on the wrist, and you can see that the timepiece wears easily, comfortably, flat flush, just not quite as flat and as flush as the GP. It's an imposing watch, and I would probably wear the GP on a wrist down to 14 centimeters, whereas with this one, it would be more like, I think, 15 centimeters. Any smaller, you're going to want something like an OP Datejust 36. And let's take a quick look at a watch that represents a different thread of full bracelet sports watch fanfare. This is the 1-year reference 116719BLRO. It's the Pepsi with the blue lacquer dial and the 116 reference. So this model came out in 2018, the year Rolex launched the Pepsi in steel on the Jubilee. To differentiate the much more expensive white gold version, initially it featured a monopoly on the Oyster bracelet, that would later end, and a unique blue dial, which to this day remains a signature of the white gold Pepsi. Now the thing about this watch is that it was made in two different versions, the born as blue and then the converted blue. Is in one of the rarest instances of Rolex recall I've ever seen. The company offered to interchange the dials of the black dialed white gold Pepsis for the newer blue one. Well, this one, which is a U.S. market watch, has blue on the warranty card, and that's something that's generally true just of U.S. market watches, giving you a little bit more of a clue of whether the watch was converted or born as. Internally, automatic winding, 48-hour power reserve, 2 independently settable time zones, though if you use the bezel, you can temporarily see 3. It's 100 meters water resistant, just as anti-magnetic as the Datejust 41 we saw a moment ago. It features the same internal clasp design, which means you have the Easy Link system, though there is some difference in the way the two of them lock. As you can see here, we have this lift lock system with the beacon to hook, and then we have the clamshell, whereas if you go back to the Datejust 41, you can see it does have the Easy Link system, but it does not have the clamshell. It's a much less complex clasp. It has the lift lock system only. That's because this is more of an all-arounder, whereas Rolex still regards this as a fairly hardcore sports watch. Of course, originally developed for Pan Am pilots, launched in 1954, the idea was that you would set that 24-hour hand to Greenwich Mean Time, then use the bezel to calculate the time at your port or airport of arrival. Now, it's quite well loomed, and as you can see here too, it is Chromalight blue. A wonderful watch that wears a bit more compact than the Datejust 41, so you could probably get away with this on a 14 centimeter circumference wrist. It is quite flat, though it's not as flat as the two you just saw, and it wears handsomely and comfortably, albeit with a sense of incredible mass. This is a very heavy watch, and that's a function of the solid case back, solid end links, solid center links, and the thick gauge of the white gold clasp, a very special timepiece. Now, you don't need precious metal to be special, or precious for that matter. Here we have the 39.5 millimeter stainless steel Grunerfeld 1941 Principia automatic, launched in late 2018 for the 2019 model year. This was Tim and Bart Grunerfeld's first automatic watch. Several dials are available, though I can't conceive of ordering this watch without the Dutch orange metallic. It's a lovely granular blasted finish, and then we have polished inner rings that set apart the lower planes of the dial. We have subdials for seconds as well as the inner dial outboard. We have black polished and faceted hour indices. We have a black polished cannon pinion and then fire blued alpha style hands. The case is quite gorgeous. As you can see, it has swells and hollows. It has fluting of bezel and of lug. It is a gorgeous form, and it uses a strap that is made of buffalo and wonderfully supple and soft. You can see though that this is a brand new Grunerfeld factory strap, so no crimping, no gouging, and yet it has that wonderful softness that's a characteristic of these straps. The movement, automatic winding with a 56-hour power reserve, features bridges shaped like the bell gable roofs of traditional Dutch houses. You can also see that each bridge features 3 different types of finish: frosting or graining inside, then there's satin raised and relieved along the edge, then on the very edge you can see there's mirrored anglage. All bridges are made of stainless steel because it's harder, it's more difficult to finish, and it better showcases the competence of the Grunerfeld brothers, who are alumni of Audemars Piguet Renault et Papy, so they well know how to finish finely. You can see their golden chaton finishing the individual bridges, these little pivot holders for the jewels. You can see they're made of gold, a nod to the pocket watch era. And then we have satination on all the wheels, including a glorious solarization on the barrel. And you can see that there are sharp interior angles within the balance bridge, which has been skeletonized. It's also free sprung and has a full bridge architecture for better shock tolerance. You can see the rotor features several different types of finish. We have beveling on its edge. We have that raised relieved satination around its border. We have a chiseled interior, and then we have black polish at the center over the bearings. A very impressive watch. Again, 39.5 millimeters, so it wears nicely on a smaller wrist. It's a watch for men and for women, and it's an elegant watch that is undeniably sporty with a steel case and all of this color, but it could easily be your dress watch due to its size, proportions, and the fact that it is very thin and slides underneath a sleeve. Here's another watch that is manifestly appropriate for men and women. This is the Ocean Commitment 3 from Blancpain. Technically, this is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Ocean Commitment 3. It's the 40.3 millimeter stainless steel reference 5008. Launched in 2018, you can see it's an individually numbered series of 250. The entire case is satin finished, which really improves the aesthetic of the watch, as high polish is a bit too glam for an all-out sports watch. And with 300-meter water resistance, a sapphire crystal over the bezel, as well as another one over the dial, and plenty of lume, this is an all-out sports watch. Blue sunburst dial. Let's hear the ratchet of the bezel. For some reason, the reference 5008 bezel is just a little bit crisper than what you'll find on the 5000 bathyscaphe or the 5015 standard 50 fathoms. Now, this watch has impressive lume. Because of the sapphire cap over the bezel, you can lume the whole bezel with no danger of the luminescence being chipped off by contact. So the watch is gorgeous. And as you can see, it is part of the Ocean Commitment series. The other two were chronographs. This one is the smallest and the most wearable. It includes a movement which is based on the 1150, and it hasn't fallen far from the tree. As you can see, this watch uses the 1151. We have a 4-day power reserve here, twin mainspring barrels. It's free sprung with a silicone hairspring for anti-magnetism, and it's nicely finished with broad mirrored anglage, Côte de Genève, a triple finished rotor, black polished screw heads, engine turning on the base plate, satination on the wheels, and you can see that even the locating pegs for locating the bridges, those too have been black polished on their heads. So a very impressive watch with impressive technical capabilities. The 4 days of power reserve is still unexpected on a dive class watch, and it does wear so nicely, being short across the wrist to the point that even a 13.5 centimeter circumference wrist will wear this one well. It has all the hallmarks of the current generation of 50 fathoms, but without the 45 millimeter size. So this one is probably going to age quite well. The blue, the lime green of the lume, and the satination of the case really make this edition special, and it uses a virtually indestructible sailcloth strap with a rubber-lined underside. We've got another take on the diver right here. This one vintage inflected. Now, this is the Omega Seamaster 300 Spectre, a 2015 limited edition of 7,007 pieces. It draws heavily from the early days of the Seamaster. You can see a little bit of the original CK2913, the 14755 in those straight lugs with their squared off ends and minimal beveling. Here we have the lollipop style seconds hand that's not standard on the Seamaster 300, though it would have been seen on some of the early Seamaster 300s, but it is not standard on the modern version of the watch. We also have a little bit of a change on the dial, as the Spectre version features the Omega logo rather than a 12 up 12 o'clock. So exclusive features for the Spectre are the limited edition, the edition numbering, the lollipop seconds, the slightly different dial, and then we have a bidirectional rotating 0 to 11 ceramic capped bezel rather than the more conventional dive bezel that you see on the standard Seamaster 300. The dial is sandwich style, so it's a stencil with recessed luminova. We'll do a quick loom shot. The thing I like about this watch is that even though it is a Fotina dial, the Fotina still glows bright blue, just like Rolex Chromalight, so you don't lose any luminescent intensity because of the use of that Fotina effect. Now, inside the clasp, you can see it is 007 branded. That's another way this watch differs from the Seamaster 300 standard model. We have about 9.6 millimeters of incremental adjustment. There is a push-button slider. You can see around the reverse side, we have that Spectre nomenclature on the reverse side, and it is individually numbered. This is number 2078. Twin barrels, automatic winding, 60-hour power reserve. You can see the watch is a master coaxial chronometer. It meets the ISO 3159, but it goes beyond. It's highly anti-magnetic. It's 300 meters water resistant. Thanks to the full balance bridge, you can see that it is a very shock tolerant. You also have a free sprung index, which contributes to the shock tolerance, but also allows the watch to be regulated very precisely. Anti-magnetic silicon escapement and hairspring, coaxial escapement, a very impressive watch with a cool stealth setting feature. If you are a world wanderer like James Bond and you're going to be traveling from time zone to time zone, you can actually set the hour hand independently. It's still ticking. It hasn't stopped. This is great if you want to make quick on-the-fly adjustments. It's a 41 millimeter watch, but it wears fairly large because of the solid end links. The look is vintage, but the fit is modern, and so is the stance on the wrist. As you can see, the watch isn't quite as thick as it could be. It's over 14 millimeters, make no mistake. But it's only about 14.1 as I measure it. A comfortable watch and a nice presence on the wrist without being oversized. If you want something that is far, far thinner, then I direct your attention to the Bulgari Octofenismo Automatic. This is the screw-down crown steel 100-meter water-resistant version. So it is 6.7 millimeters thick, which is still very, very, very thin, even compared to something that's remarkably thin by any other standard. We compare it here to the Laureato, which I told you was admirably thin, and you can see the Laureato looks tubby, almost Hublot-like compared to the Bulgari. Now, the watch has a lovely integrated bracelet, and one thing I like about the steel model is that you get more contrast than with the titanium. You also get a more satisfying weight, so it doesn't feel toy-like. You have that contrast between polished and brushed finish on the bracelet, and then you have this system. This is clever. This is universal to the Octofenismos, but there's a recess inside the links adjacent to the clasp, so when the clasp is closed, the resulting combination of clasp and bracelet is only as thick as the individual bracelet links by themselves. Now, rolling back to the case, you can see the contrast between the satin and the polish is really quite becoming and preferable in many ways to the all-media blasted finish of the titanium. It is a good-looking watch that is remarkably nuanced and complex. You can see the dial has polished indices, hands, and numerals, but then we have this lovely vertical curtain of satination, and on the reverse side, an automatic manufacture movement that is quite nicely finished. Made in the Vallée du Jeu, in the factory that used to make the old Daniel Roth and Gerald Genta watches. The movement is 2.23 millimeters thick, and it's over 36 millimeters in diameter, so it's broad and it's thin, and it's built specifically for this case, which is an impressive mark of a true manufacturer. No corners are cut. As you can see, the micro rotor automatic is made of platinum, not cheaper gold or tungsten, and it has a 60-hour power reserve, which is particularly impressive given the single barrel and the absolute lack of dimensions in which to hide all of that mainspring energy. Now, when you throw the watch on the wrist, it's only 46 millimeters from lug to lug, 40 millimeters in diameter, and then that 6.7 millimeter thickness is barely there. It sits lower than your wrist hair. This is a brand that has everything going on. Fabrizio Buonamassa, their design director, was comfortable taking a shape, the Octo, that predated the Bulgari involvement with the brand, and this dates back to the Gerald Genta era, but by refining this shape, the company has created something that has become iconic for Bulgari, and Bulgari is comfortable inheriting and improving, and that's why this watch is so strong and goes from strength to strength. The watch also includes that water resistance of 100 meters, so while it is dressy in appearance, it is very much a sports watch. Let's talk about two other all-arounders. I kept calling this poor Datejust 41 an OP, and while it is an Oyster Perpetual, it's the Oyster Perpetual Datejust 41. Here's a true Oyster Perpetual. This is the Oyster Perpetual 36, and you can see it has a lovely white grape dial. This is the reference 116000, 36 millimeters in diameter and 904L steel. We'll do a quick Loom Shot right here. This is an all-arounder and a real classic, as it evokes the original 1933 Oyster Perpetual, a watch that unified the Rolex Oyster water-resistant case with the Perpetual rotor winding system. So this watch features a lot of the imagery of those original bubble backs, which were so named because they featured a larger case back to accommodate the winding rotor. On the wrist, the watch is suitable for a wrist as small as 13 centimeters circumference, but note, my 16 centimeter circumference wrist wears it well. A lot of folks prefer some discretion with their Rolex. It is a very visible brand, and these watches are iconic. They're also sometimes inclined to draw the wrong kind of attention. Well, with this watch, which fits underneath the cuff and a handsome, discreet, traditional size, only the true cognoscenti are going to notice and comment on your Oyster Perpetual with white grape dial. The watch, of course, features automatic winding, 48-hour power reserve, chronometer certification, hacking seconds, anti-magnetism, and, of course, 904L steel, which is a Rolex alloy that never needs to be rinsed after exposure to salt, including salt water. There is a lot to love with this watch. There's also a lot to love with this watch. You're about to see something that's relatively recent, having just come out last year for the 140th anniversary of Seiko, the SLGA 007. This is the Lake Sua dial, spring drive 5 days. So you can see, and I'm going to do my best to show you this, but you can see that there's an undulating pattern to this dial, and it's stamped in a pattern and galvanized in a color that emulates the surface of Lake Sua near the manufacturer that constructs these Grand Seiko watches. It is remarkably beautiful. 40 millimeters, sorry about these fingerprints, but 40 millimeters, as you can see, a watch that is reasonably thin, beautifully proportioned, handsomely polished. They use the Zaratsu black polishing technique on this case, so it's held against a spinning tin plate that polishes the surface, and this is an art form that takes about 3 years to learn. So this is a handcrafted watch. You can also see that the features of the dial, such as the frame for the date, the logo, the indices, they've been micro-faceted, polished, and brushed by artisans who craft these components all day long. Now, the watch is impressively made in stainless steel, 100 meters water resistant. It is a 2021-piece limited edition. You can't see much of the 9RA2 movement, but it was a brand new version of the spring drive with twin mainspring barrels. It now has a 5-day power reserve rather than the old 3-day. And because a lot of folks didn't like the look of the power reserve indicator on the dial, they moved it to the case back. So now you get a much cleaner looking Grand Seiko spring drive watch. There's also a yellow gold medallion inset within the clasp, which is a special edition feature. At 40 millimeters, this watch in steel is the ultimate Datejust 41 rival, and I would encourage you to compare this to the Datejust 41. This, of course, has the advantage in power reserve, accuracy, display case back, and probably dial artistry and craft arts with the polishing of the case and the manufacture of the dial. Rolex has the advantage in that it is thinner, of course, and it has the EasyLink system in its bracelet plus loom. I'm not going to declare a winner between these two, as the choice often comes down to a matter of priority, but if you want to know which one I would prefer to own, it would be the Grand Seiko, and it's not down to any one factor. There's aesthetic interest, there's the handcraft angle, there's the exclusivity, and of course there is the technical interest. Of course, everything about this watch appeals to me. These are great watches. There is no wrong answer. It comes down to individual priority, and it gets even better when you can bring in a true high horology exotic like this 28-piece limited edition Girard Perregaux. You cannot go wrong choosing among these three. Now, I am a big fan of high horology, and while we just looked at watches best described as luxury horology, this is true haute horlogerie. This is the haute de gamme. This is a brand that has made fewer than 3,000 watches since its founding in 2002, and even today only makes about 200 a year. This is possibly the most attractive de Bethune DB25 power reserve I've ever seen. You can see it's 44 millimeters in white gold. The dial is all fired blue satin titanium. So you can see they have metallized this track that bears the individual minutes. And then everything here, this has been frosted. The center dial has been cut with a microlight engraving, which is de Bethune's proprietary alternative to guilloche. The hands at center are black polished. There's a satinated metallic hour track with a railroad track outboard. We have little blue-fired polished cabochon of titanium for the hours. And then we have a power reserve indicator up at 12 o'clock. The DB25 is a bit more accessible to a lot of folks than the DB27s and 28s, because the dials are closed, the cases and the lugs are conventional, and though this is a 44, it really doesn't wear that way. It's only about 51 millimeters from lug to lug, so you can see I can wear it quite easily on my 16 centimeter wrist, and it's flat enough to easily slide underneath your sleeve, so if you want it to be your dress watch, it will be your dress watch. Technically speaking, you get all of the refinements and innovations for which de Bethune is rightly known, as we have caliber 2024 twin barrels, 6 days of power reserve, power reserve indicator, shock-protected rotor winding system with titanium blue-fired arms and a platinum mass for maximum winding efficiency. The watch has 2 self-adjusting barrels, that's patented. The shock protection for the winder is patented. The 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance, that's patented. The 2-element hairspring, which breathes concentrically like an overcoil, that's patented, and so is the titanium and platinum balance wheel, which is shaped like a double-sided battle axe crossed over 2 ways, so 2 separate yokes, 90 degrees opposed, with platinum masses to reduce the effect of temperature change on the timing and to put as much of the mass outboard as possible. Of course, the watch with a 6-day power reserve really never needs to be wound. Just wear it 1 day a week, and you're pretty close to good. This is a timepiece you could wear all the time. It is tough, it is handsome, it is versatile, and it is rare. There are fewer than 3,000 de Bethune watches in the world, but very, very few like this one. This dial is going to be remembered as one of the most niche and unusual the company ever made. If you're familiar with dials like the Jade Dial FP Journe or the Holland & Holland chronometer, this is that level of rarity, only more so, and in my opinion, greater aesthetic appeal. Let's jump into rose gold and 2 from Richemont. Very special watches in my book here. We have the Alangu and Zona Zeitberg in rose gold. 42 millimeters, you can see we're gonna set this one so it jumps for maximum effect. 42 millimeters in rose gold. This watch launched in 2009. It immediately won the GPHG Egidol as the best watch of the year. And that was as a German watch in a Swiss competition. But it's true, this won the equivalent of best picture at the Oscars of watchmaking. Now on the dial side, there's a lot to love. Jumping hours, jumping minutes, power reserve indicator, 36 hours, running seconds with hacking. The dial that's silver white, that's actually sterling silver. The center dial, which is golden hued, is actually part of the movement. And that is made of German silver, a nickel, copper, and zinc alloy that has a wonderful golden hue to it. The case is simple but strong. We'll do a wrist shot in a second. We have caliber L043 on the reverse side, which is a masterpiece, both technically and aesthetically. You can see that there is a little bridge that stretches from a pinwheel or an air brake. That slows down the energy from the jump. The barrel first jumps the minutes, then the energy from the jump travels through the second locking lever through a hairspring between 2 third wheels, and that hairspring gets topped off every minute with a burst of energy, and the hairspring drives the balance. So the watch maintains very consistent balance amplitude for its full power reserve. Now, the watch is also adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer, free sprung, and features a handmade overcoil hairspring for concentric breathing and equal timekeeping in every position. Not every Longo watch has that. You can see that the balance has been freehand engraved on the balance cock side, and then also on the cock for the escape wheel, which has a black polished cap. You can see on this watch we have both fired blue and black polished screws. The watch includes both German silver bridges and plates, satination atop the barrel, black polishing for its stopworks, solarization on the crown wheel, you can see, and then we have beautiful mirrored anglage on both the steel and the German silver components with German stripes across the bridges. It is a very special watch, and it includes something rarely seen on Longo watches, which is the full deployant clasp. Most of these include only pin buckles, even complications. So we'll throw this, well, you know what we'll do? We'll do the big jump again. That's the nice thing about the hacking seconds and the quick set. You're never far away from retracing your step and doubling your pleasure. Now, taking a quick look at the watch on the wrist, it's large, but it's not huge. I wouldn't classify it as an oversized dress watch. It's probably the bare minimum of size necessary to do what they wanted the movement to do, and it does it beautifully. It's a little bit more intense than the white gold model. It wears well with most skin tones, however, whereas the white gold model can occasionally clash. It's a handsome watch, a versatile watch, a lovable watch, and a sporty dress watch. A dress watch, yes, but not a prissy, frilly thing you can only take out when you plan to go black tie. This is a watch you're supposed to enjoy routinely, and it has the durability and the track record to back that up. I mentioned 2 in red gold from Richemont. This, one of the most intriguing Panerai watches you will ever encounter. The timepiece, a 300-piece limited edition, and you can see on the reverse side, this one has a P. So M was 2010, N was 11, O was 12, and P was 13. That's how that works. Taking a quick look at the dial, it is a brown bronze sandwich construction, which means you have this lovely brown bronze sunburst metallic over a solid disc of lume, which means when the light is out, it is a remarkably luminescent watch. You could see that everything, the power reserve, the chronograph minutes, the constant seconds, the AM/PM indicator for the second time zone, all of that is luminescent. And take another look. There's a lot to see here. This watch, technically called the Panerai Rajamir 1940 Chronomonopulsante, 8 days GMT, PAM 502, all of those things it is. But the Chronomonopulsante is a lovely GMT power reserve with a remarkable number of setting modes. So the first I'm going to show you, you can hide that second time zone if you really don't want it. It's a 12-hour hand, so it's never going to be displaced from underneath the local hour hand. Now watch the second subdial. When I activate stop seconds, it's a 0 reset. The seconds hand jumps straight to the index at 12. So now I can set the watch quite precisely against a reference time. You have that little AM/PM index that allows you to have that 12-hour format hour hand while still knowing whether it's day or night in your reference time zone. The watch includes the dog fang style power reserve indicator. That's what the Panaristi call that particular design. The hands are all rose gold and quite lovely. You have that 1970s style OP logo on the crown. We have a mono pusher chronograph, as a chronograph called Monopulsante should be a mono pusher, and the feel is outstanding as it has a crisp column wheel. Taking a quick look, you can see this one features a full red gold deploying clasp. The 300-piece PAM 502 also includes one of the most artisanally crafted Panerai calibers of all time. It is surface swimmable with a screw-down crown and 50-meter water resistance. You can see that the reverse of the case has been both satinated with media blasting and polished, and the bridge has been beautifully satinated with mirrored anglage within all of its skeletonized hollows. You can see that it has a black polished column wheel. It has a vertical clutch for crisp, clean, seamless operation of its chronograph. The watch has a wonderful column wheel feel. You hear it, you feel it. Turn it all over again, you can see that it beats away at 8 beats per second. It has a full balance bridge and a free sprung index to make it a tough movement. It is a sports watch caliber 2004-10, an in-house caliber from the original family of 2000 series movements designed for Panerai by Eric Klein. All of these watches were over-engineered. The original 2000 series movements were Panerai's first. They wanted to make a splash and put as much distance between the in-house calibers and the ETA movements they'd previously used as possible, so they went overboard. And while they decontented and reduced the spec of their in-house calibers over the year, the 2000 series movements represent the absolute best they have ever achieved. This is a power reserve, a 0 reset, a mono pusher chronograph, and a GMT. All of those things all in one, and you can see it's impressively sized at 45 millimeters, though I could absolutely wear this watch. My arm is bigger than it looks on this camera, so I'm going to zoom out and assure you that even if your wrist is my size, you're still going to be able to wear this watch well, because the camera normally makes the watch look bigger than it is on the wrist. You could absolutely get away with this. It's alligator leather and brown, which is way upscale compared to the calfskin and rubber Panerai normally uses. This PAM 502 is super special, ultra rare, and maybe even the Panerai for the guy who said he would never buy a Panerai. That said, you have competition for your rose gold super sports watch money. And from Le Brassus, this is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Diver Boutique Limited Edition. This was a 500-piece titanium and rose gold limited edition in 2018 for Japanese Audemars Piguet dealers. We have a ceramic shoulder for the bezel operating crown as well as the standard crown. It's remarkably thin at just over, I will show you, just over 13.7 millimeters, and that is because, unlike the chronograph of that time, it's not a modular movement. It is a single level of caliber inside the case, and as a result, the date is flush with the dial, which is something you don't see on the modular chronos. Now we have this lovely black polished and satinated titanium bezel. You can see that the bezel gasket is expressed as a large contrasting black ring. We have a wonderful granular profiled cut vulcanized rubber strap. We have titanium intermediate links for contrast. The watch is a limited edition of 5 500 pieces, and you can see it has a matching rose gold buckle. The power reserve is 60 hours, and as you can see, there is an internal rotating diving bezel, the 300-meter watch, an ISO 6425 compliant diving timepiece. Take a quick look at night, and the watch is easy to read, quite luminescent. Taking another look, throwing it on the wrist. My wrist, being 16 centimeters in circumference, can wear this 42-millimeter watch, but take note, as a Royal Oak offshore, it does wear larger than its rated size, so it's rated as a 42. I encourage you to think of it as more of a 44. That said, it really is quite thin for one of these, as the offshores are known for being thick. This one is not. Broad and heavy, yes, but thick it is not. Turn it all over. The movement's attractive. Caliber 3120, an in-house caliber from AP. Stop seconds. It has a quick set date. It beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, and it's braced against shock by relatively thick construction, a full balance bridge, and a free-sprung Gyromax style balance. We have the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet family on the rotor to remind you that this is the oldest Swiss watch brand continuously owned and operated by the founding families since 1875. Taking a quick look on the side, you can see that the strap is held to the case using screws and bars, and that's how it should be. On a large, heavy, and expensive watch, you should have screws and bars. Spring bars create too much risk, and this reduces that risk, ameliorating the situation to the point that you don't have to fear ever losing your watch. A lovely gray dial with rose gold applique indices. It is incredibly handsome from any angle, and the case gives you that level of attention to detail and hand finish that you expect on a Royal Oak or an offshore. Now, this is a very special watch because only 4 will be made, and if you wish to make another, you're going to have to go pretty far to do it. 40 millimeters in red gold. This is the H. Moser & C Endeavor Center Second Moonstone. It is a 4-piece limited edition commissioned by a prominent collector who bought a moonstone and then had it combined with the watch by Moser. So 4 of these were made. You can see it has the lovely Endeavor case with its complexities, the hollows, the satination, the ebb, the flow, the swells, and the dips. And then the dial is made of moonstone. You can really see those minerals, not only ensuring that this will be a rare edition, but no 2 of the 4 are exactly alike. This would be what Moser normally calls a concept dial, as there are no markings, no printings, no indices. But it is also moonstone, meaning it is more than just an unadorned dial. It is exceptionally unusual and special. It has a 3-day power reserve courtesy of Moser manufactured caliber HMC 200. Moser makes not only the movement but also the balance, the hairspring, and the escapement. It's bidirectional winding with a magic lever winding system. It features hacking seconds, and it beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour. As with Audemars Piguet and FP Journe, it includes a combination of manual and mechanical finishing, but everything is thoughtfully laid out, and you can see that some of the finishing techniques are unique, such as the 4 different finishes you'll find on the rotor and the double-crested Côte de Genève used across the bridges. Throw it on the wrist. The watch is compact at 40 millimeters and very thin. It's a graceful dress watch, and it comes with a wonderful story. If you own an Omega Moon watch, you need to complement it with the watch that's actually been there, the Moonstone. I always try to finish with a favorite, and for me, Datejust has always been that. I loved the company from the first. The watches are extravagant, and they take some confidence to own. But this is the equivalent of the Koenigsegg, the Pagani, the Rimac. This is not the Ferrari. This is not the Lamborghini. This is a level above that. This watch, only 8.6 millimeters thick, entirely handcrafted, has more black polish hand-laid with diamond paste across its surfacing than you will find on a dozen or more Patek Philippe's. The watch, of course, a 10-year anniversary edition, the DB28 XP, launched in 2020 to celebrate the watch that won the Aiguille d'Or at the GPHG for Datejust back in 2011. That watch was originally launched in 2010, so this was the 1-decade anniversary model. Datejust makes its cases, its dials, and its movements. So you can see the case is unique to the DB28 XP. It has a different shape, and you can see the floating lugs, variable geometry. The watch is 43 millimeters in diameter, 8.6, 8.7 millimeters thick. They engraved the case flank with their proprietary micro-light engraving. They did the same on the reverse side, and then they included it on the movement. You can see they use this in lieu of guilloche because it's more modern. but it's made the same way, reductively cut with a lathe. You have an hour track outboard with polished globes of titanium. You have that black polish on the deltoid bridge for the barrels. You can see that the edge of the bridge has been satinated. You'll also appreciate that the entire balance bridge has been black polished and has that lovely mirrored rounding on its side. We have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs. This is triple parachute shock protection, and over time De Bethune does evolve its balance designs. So this one is the latest, and you can see it features white gold masses outboard with a titanium ring, a titanium wheel. The idea there is, again, to reduce the impact of temperature change on timing, and then to put as much of the mass outboard as possible. 6 days of power reserve, ultra thin, manual wind, and protected by approximately 6 individual patents. These are rare watches built in only a few dozen copies per year. The company as a whole only makes 200 to 220 watches per year. It is super slim, and you can see even on my tiny wrist, it's nowhere near overlapping the edges. The lugs don't project out. This is, quite honestly, as good as it gets in independent horology. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of any of the watches you see here.